Hey, welcome back to Sweat Success Podcast. And I've been going through some of these things with some other gyms where we've gone through the process of setting up CRMs. We're going through the process of reactivation campaigns. And even if you have a CRM, okay, even if you have all of the messaging, right, nothing's totally automated. And I say this because I think the expectation from some gym owners is if I have a CRM, everything's easy, it's automated. We have these AI agents that are responding. Well, first of all, you've probably seen some of these messages from ChatGPT. If you've done it yourself or you've seen other people send you stuff, a lot of times it's pretty consistent with the way that message comes through, right? So you see this, "Hi, I hope you're doing well." That's usually like the first subject line of the message from ChatGPT. It's so predictable that someone's using ChatGPT when you see that. And then there's certain, language and certain, word choices that are used because it's coming from the same product, right? So everybody in the world is all of a sudden writing the same. So that being said, if you have a CRM and you have these automation tools in place, you can't simply just expect that magic happens because your customers don't know that it's an automation tool or that it's not an automated message, right? You need to expect that they are smart enough because most of them are. Right? They can identify that they're savvy consumers. They can identify price points. They can identify best places to work out. They can look on Google reviews and read all the bad reviews and all the good ones. And they have probably gotten text messages just like you from some of these automation tools. So it's really important that your CRM is not just fully automated because that doesn't work. Okay? At least not today. It might in the future where you can hire RoboCop to be your, he gets into a different position. All of a sudden, this RoboCop guy is now, I don't know why he has to be a cop, but he changed careers, right? So now he's in there and he's sending messages and he's truly your assistant, right? Speaking on your behalf in the same tone of voice that you would talk or the same tone of voice that your salesperson would talk. So I think it's so critical that when you're having these conversations with your customers via text message or email, that it's your voice. It's coming across as you. So the first messages that go out should be semi-automated, right? Especially if you're doing a reactivation campaign, it's going to be a lot of questions. And those questions are going to prompt them to answer a certain way. And when they answer a certain way, you're going to have a history, from history, you're going to have a list of different types of responses that you'd normally respond to, and then ask another question. The reason why I say ask questions, because sitting down with someone and getting them to talk to you in the fitness industry or really any industry, when you're sitting down to sell something, I hate using the word sales because it's, I think it has such a bad negative connotation to it. I like to use the word influencing someone to make a healthier decision. So when you're sitting down with someone, you're helping them work through this process in their mind, right? Logically, to understand that they need to get to this point where they're going to go, I think I'm going to do that. Well, that's the Socratic method, so to speak, right? This was written by Plato years ago, taking notes on what Socrates had done and how, philosophically he was teaching. But the point is that there are these tools today. You use the Socratic method or the spin method, which is a way that you go through a process of asking questions in order to achieve a logical result and a sound resolution for the person who's sitting in front of you that you're having a conversation with. And you have that same thing through the commitment consistency principle. And quite honestly, I didn't even know what some of these meant. Or what that there were names given to them because we were doing them. I wouldn't say naturally, but I was learning this stuff from other people and they probably knew what they were, but nobody said this is the name of this. Well, you may have done this already in the past and it worked for me, which is, getting small little yeses to finally achieve that big yes. Or affirmation saying, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm finally on board to change my life and move into a better direction. So that's the commitment consistency principle, where you go through a process of asking a series of questions, and it's question that's going to lead to an affirmative response, right? Not a yes, no question. It's more of a, you would agree with me, wouldn't you, type of question. So going through that process is the same when you're doing a reactivation campaign or the same when you're doing things through your CRM. You want to be sending messages that are going to elicit a response from them where they're going, yeah, that makes sense. And I can agree with that. So that way you can finally get them to book an appointment. And when they come in, you're going to be using that same methodology. And I say this because I think that I could be wrong, but I really think that when you go from this point of reference where you're in person with someone and you're sitting there and you're having a real strong, like solid conversation. And then you take that conversation online, right? You take it out of the realm of the environment that they're in where they're having this dialogue with you and they, maybe they can't leave right this second because they're in conversation. Well, when you do this through a CRM or through some type of automation, you always want to have some kind of question. So one of the questions we use for reactivation, now it's not just the single question. There's a lot of things like if somebody stops, right, they do a DND on you and they don't want to be contacted anymore, you got to throw them into a different workflow. So that way they don't all of a sudden get another message and then you're in trouble and you get fined. So one of the questions that we ask is, or statements, question statements is, hey, John, this is Michael over XYZ Gym. I was just reaching out to you because you had some member perks on your account. I wanted to see if you wanted to go ahead and use those or let them expire out, right? So it gets them in this mindset of, oh, I have something I didn't know I had. And a lot of the responses you might get back are, well, I'm no longer a member there. I didn't realize I had something on my account. And then you can respond accordingly. Or they might say something like, what are those, right? That's a common one. And I want to read something to you that happened, right? So this person responded and said, I'm interested. I would like to use those. What are they? So the response was, we'll talk. Good morning. Yes. Kind of like, yes, we're excited to go ahead and help you use those. We'll talk about your biggest struggle and the number one goal, your fitness journey, and help you develop a game plan to reach your goals as quickly as possible. We do a movement analysis and a body composition based on your goals. And you also have a PNF stretch session to help with mobility and reduce risk of injury, period. No more conversation. That person who was initially interested, right, psychologically like, well, that sounds great. What is that member perk that you're offering? Or what are those member perks that you're offering? And person responding just like, here's a dissertation, period, done. Nothing against the response, because actually in conversation, right, if they're in front of you and that's part of the dialogue you're having, totally fine. The challenge is removing yourself from being in that room, because you're actually in that environment a lot of times when you're texting or chatting with the customer, right? Because you're at the gym. Well, they're not there with you. So you just kind of revert back to the way that you normally have conversations. So you have to adjust this a little bit and be mindful that these messages need to be quick, okay? And you have to use that consistency or commitment consistency principle. And you need to use kind of like a Socratic method or that spin method. Spin being situation, what's the situation? What's the problem you're having? Implication, like what are the implications if you don't do anything? And then how can I address your needs? So that's spin, by the way. When you're in this position where you're sending these text messages, you're sending these emails or a chat, okay, it could be Facebook or WhatsApp, and you're chatting with them, what I found that has worked best for me is to continue along the question dialogue. Naturally, people like talking about themselves. Heck, I'm here, I'm talking, right? So, but my goal is to actually take whatever I've got in my brain and get it out there and hope that there's some value in it or something that you guys can use, because I've seen this time and time again. So when I listen to this and I hear, staff members of gyms or I see the responses of customers, I go, man, only if they did it this way, right? So here's an example of that same thing, right? And how I would recommend making this adjustment. Okay, so instead of responding and saying, here's the dialogue, a simple response would be, sure, there's a variety of different options. We have this, or this. Which one would you like to use, right? So you can go ahead and ask the question or even give an answer. But at the end, you want to ask another question, right? You want to keep that dialogue going, give a brief answer and ask another question, give another brief answer and ask a question. And the goal is to get them in the door, because if they start answering your questions and then you can get them to reaffirm the things that sound good to them, right? That sounds good to you, doesn't it? Yes, great, perfect. So you can eventually work them towards that commitment consistency principle of getting them to say yes to book an appointment. So needless to say, things are a little different when you send text messages and emails, and you should also warm up your team on the fact that maybe your data in your database is not the right information, right? So maybe somebody else's phone number is under my name in your database, because at some point in time, you had somebody on your team that was not so good at inputting information, right? So that's going to happen. You might send a message to me, Michael, and in your message, you say, hey, Jody. Well, I'm not Jody. So I might respond back and be like, I'm not Jody. So your natural response, your team should be prepared for this stuff, right? They should be ready to be able to respond back to this guy, Michael, and say, hey, so sorry for that. My apologies. That was supposed to go out to Jody. By the way, who is this? I just want to make sure, because I have your information in our system, right? Or something along those lines. I'm not always perfect at this. I'm just kind of going on the fly, but you get my point, is that your team needs to be prepared for those conversations, so that way they don't get stuck and freeze like a deer in headlights, okay? Because it happens. when your staff is not prepared to handle a situation that you haven't prepared them for, guess what? They're not going to know what to do. All right. And so you might have some bad dialogue or bad conversations, and then you don't know what's going to happen from there. So those are the things I wanted to hit on today because I felt it was really important. I see this a lot, and I hope something in this, rant that I've had here has some value and you can immediately put it to use today. Thanks for listening. And again, I will catch you guys on the flip side.